But anyway, so retain your brain. As we move through these slides, we just like to say up front, nothing you're going to hear today is going to be a substitute for your doctor's advice. It's really designed to be more of a nudge in the right direction. It's an awareness piece, and we hopefully accomplish that with you tonight. But before we get into it, I always like to start out with just a little participation from the crowd, nothing hard, just a little show of hands. Has anyone here had family members who had to deal with dementia, Alzheimer's, some other type of cognitive decline? Anyone? Okay, a lot of hands up. I was in that same boat. My grandmother actually went through it in her later years, so I know it can be difficult. Now, for those of you that raised your hands, do you feel as though that you're at a greater risk for something like dementia because someone in your family had it? Anyone feel that way? Okay. And then the last question, this kind of applies maybe to everyone, but as far as risks are concerned, who believes that maybe genetics is the #1 determining factor? Anyone here feel that way? All right, we've got a few. So those last two questions I'm going to hold off answering right away. We'll get to them in a second. But first, we want to meet the Dr. Mark Milstein from UCLA. He's our partner in putting this content together. He's a leading researcher in neuroscience, happiness, health. His insights give us science-based ways to keep our brains healthy, boost productivity, maximize longevity. He's been doing it a long time. He actually has a book, which I'll just give you a look at here. It's The Age-Proof Brain. And if you want to go into any of this content any deeper, you can. I promise you I'm not trying to sell you a book. This is my only copy. You can't have it. But it does exist if you want to get a little bit deeper. And excuse me, I want to read this. So we have strong evidence that simple lifestyle interventions can dramatically improve brain health and lower the risk of disease today, tomorrow, and in years to come. So kind of let the cat out of the bag there a bit, but we'll answer those two other questions. So the first one was, who thinks that maybe they're at a greater risk because someone in your family had it? Well, in 2019 Alzheimer's study, we found that lifestyle factors have a greater impact, a much greater impact than genetics. And then in 2020, in another study from the Rush Medical Center in Chicago, we found that just by following doctor recommendations on those lifestyle changes, you could reduce your risk of dementia or Alzheimer's by up to 60%. So that's a huge number. So the way that those decisions you're making on a daily basis by far outweigh any type of genetic connection. So here's what we'll talk about today. The three areas: your age versus your brain's age, the importance of brain health, and how to age-proof your brain. And we'll start with your age versus your brain's age. So it may sound a little strange, but there's a difference. Someone who's 60 years old may have a brain that is like the age of someone who's 50. Or conversely, that same 6-year-old person, depending on, again, those lifestyle factors, may have a brain that's operating at a level of a 7-year-old. So what's the difference? Why does that happen? So scientists have been studying this for a long time, and they found folks that operate on that other side of the spectrum, the good side, where they're older, but their brains are functioning at a much higher capacity. Who's heard of blue zones? Anyone familiar with that term? Few out there. So blue zones are areas across the world where people live really long and they live very well. And a couple just to name, there's more than just these three, but there's Icaria, Greece. There is Ogliastrata in Sardinia, and there's the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica. And what the scientists found is that the folks that live in these areas, they're living well into their 80s and beyond. They have the cognitive and physical capabilities of people much younger than them. And they call them superagers. So then the question is, all right, well, why? Why are they superagers? What are they doing different than the rest of us? And we will touch on some of those things, diet, environment, it all plays a part. But before we get into that, let me just give you an idea of how you right now can get a sense of how, where your brain's at. How are you feeling from a cognitive perspective? So you can challenge yourself on these 5 questions on a daily basis if you'd like, and you can get a pretty good sense of where your brain cognition is. So the first one is, how can I manage my day? And it's okay that if you misplace your keys every once in a while, it's okay if you miss an appointment here and there. We all do that. What we're really talking about is increased forgetfulness. So if you feel like you're forgetting things at a higher frequency, then it's something to take a look at. So there is a condition called mild cognitive impairment, MCI. And although it is not dementia, it's a precursor of it. And about 12 to 18% of people over the age of 65 have this MCI. So, again, just keep on top of it. If that increased forgetfulness is occurring, you might want to have a doctor take a look. How well can I remember important information? So, memory, right? Memory, we like to call it a use it or lose it skill, right? We have to keep challenging ourselves to remember things. We have to practice learning and retaining information throughout our lives. Because if we're not constantly flexing that memory muscle, it'll atrophy, just like any other muscle would. So keep challenging your memory. We found that there's many exercises that you can use, but the one that I talk about most is the grocery list, right? We all put together a grocery list, maybe 15, 20 items on there. We take it to the store, we get what we need. I would challenge you as a way to practice your memory, leave the list at home. Right? It's difficult. It's a prospect that doesn't sound too fun. But I did start doing it. It's a funny story. I started doing that, and I would go to the store, and I don't know, I'd forget maybe a third of it. So I'd call my wife and say, can you tell me what I'm missing on the list? And she'd always say, well, why do you take the list to the store with you? And I told her, well, it's science. So yeah, but whatever it is in your life, whatever it is, whatever information that you think that you need to know on a daily basis, just keep trying to make those lists, remember it without looking at the list. It's just one of the best ways to exercise that muscle. How well can I move and maintain balance? It's known that walking is connected to memory. In fact, they did a study where they found out that folks who moved at an intense walk, maybe think about like power walking, if you could do that at a 9-minute burst every day, it was shown to improve memory. So, just stay active, keep walking, keep moving your body. How well can I skipped one, I apologize. How well can I move and maintain my balance is kind of connected in the same way. So balance is kind of what comes from the brain. Your balance skills are created by your brain. So if you see that your balance is declining, it may be a sign, not necessarily, but it may be a sign that your brain is declining as well. And I think it's well known that most of us, the older we get, I'm already seeing it in my own life, we do less things that require us to maintain balance. So again, just like with the walking, this is another thing, keep moving, keep doing things that challenge your balance, keep doing things, and it doesn't have to be crazy. We're not saying, climbing up a rock wall, nothing like that, but just keep moving, keep walking. A lot of people use yoga in this case for balance. But whatever that is in your life, keep doing that and keep that balance sharp. And then lastly, how old do I feel? How old do I feel? So there's a powerful connection between your perspective and your brain health and how well your brain ages. We found in a different study that people who had a positive attitude towards aging were able to reduce their risk of dementia by up to 50% compared to others who had, of course, negative views on aging. So keep things positive and try to be as young as you can be in your mind as long as you can be. So we've already touched on these 2 ideas. Memory, that is, on the left. Oh, that's a normal part of aging. There's nothing I can do. On the right, I have relatives with dementia. It's in my genes. Well, there's nothing normal about losing memory over time. Will we all have memory episodes as we age? Sure, but not severe memory loss. Those super agers aren't having it. So just keep that in mind. And the same thing, I have relatives with dementia. It's in my genes. We've already gone over those statistics. In fact, there's another statistic I want to share, which is pretty astounding, I'll say, about when it comes to genetics. So they did a study to see how much genetics did have an impact on Alzheimer's in particular. And they found that only 5% of cases, 5% of Alzheimer's were strictly genetic. And that presents itself as what they call early onset Alzheimer's. So you may have heard of that, but that's 5%. So the good news, the opposite side of that statistic is 95% of Alzheimer's cases were due to lifestyle factors. So in both cases, you have a tremendous amount of control moving forward if you're not already doing these things to slow down the progression of cognitive decline and to even make your brain younger and healthier. So we'll move on to the second section, which is the importance of brain health. And we'll start with kind of a little biology, a little behind the scenes, what's happening in the brain, what's happening just on a daily basis, and then more specifically, what's happening when we see something like Alzheimer's take hold. So brain trash, we're all day, our brains are creating trash. Think of our brains like a city, especially the cells within the brain. They are like tiny cities creating trash, and just like in your city, all that trash builds up, but the good news is that we have those municipal services and they come and haul it off. The brain doesn't have that necessarily, but it does have functions that help. Throughout the year, your brain creates your 3-pound brain creates 5 pounds of trash. So that's a lot of waste that we have to get out of there, and that waste is in the form of leftover chemical reactions. It's in the form of proteins that get used up during the day. It's in the form of toxins, toxins that you take into your body on a daily basis as well. And we have to get that flushed out because the more trash that builds up, the older the brain. And I use that term flushed out because we found recently, and by recently I mean within the last decade, but it's still, for me, it's kind of amazing that we didn't know this until about 11 years ago. But there is a process by which our body flushes the trash out of our brains. So at night, when they sleep, and we found this in a study, by the way, in 2013, as I had mentioned, Dr. Niergaard of Rochester University was doing a study on brain injuries and how sleep helps those folks repair the brain. And they found this out quite accidentally, but while they were doing scans of people while they were sleeping, they found that the brain reduced in size by 35%. So it shrunk down to about 65% of its normal size. We had no idea that this process occurred until then. And what they then found through further research and looking at what's going on during this process, when that brain shrinks down, it's actually pushing the toxins, the leftover chemical reactions, those proteins that are now trash in the brain. It's pushing it out of the brain cells and into the empty spaces in our brain. And then what they found after that is the brain stem will then push spinal fluid into our brains and drag that trash out. And that's one of, and probably the most important ways that our brains get cleaned out every night. Those are the trash men, that process. So you need that process to work very well, and you need to have it happen often. And it's happening obviously during sleep. And we're going to touch on the importance of sleep a little later. But it's just, it's an amazing way that we clean that trash out. But again, if those processes aren't working well, then we'll get more buildup of trash, and then we're unfortunately maybe onto some form of cognitive decline. One of those forms of cognitive decline is Alzheimer's. So we just have, it's pretty simplistic here, but it's just kind of an understanding of what happens when you get this in any form. So on the left side, normal. So these are the neurons. Those are the neurons within the cell talking to each other. Everything's clear over on the left side. Now over here we have two types of, these are proteins. I mentioned those 3 kinds of waste, used up proteins. At the top, beta amyloid plaques, those are proteins that build up between the neurons, and it breaks down communication between the neurons. And on the right, we have the neurofibrillary tangles. That's a protein called tau. That is inside the neurons. Again, breaking down communication. In both cases, when communication breaks down in the cells because of this buildup trash, the cells start to die off. So that's kind of an overview of what's happening in Alzheimer's. So here we take a step back from the biology of it, and we just talk about the idea of cost because I think it's very important. You're all investors here, so kind of everything that you're saving up for, whether it's retirement, vacations, it all has a kind of a cost tag on it, and you're trying to meet that goal. So, and Andrew had mentioned earlier in his presentation about unforeseen things that you have to plan for. We just like to mention that this may be one of those things that you have to seriously consider. So the cost of dementia and Alzheimer's includes medications, caregiving, housing needs. There could be a couple more things added there. But when you think about how those three things might add up in 1 year, and then we tie it to the fact that an Alzheimer's patient has an average life expectancy of 4 to 8 years, that's a lot of money. And then some people live as long as 20 years. So it's just something that you need to be aware of and thinking about it. Am I prepared for this possibility? And then we just touch on progression of care costs. So, these are national averages, by the way. Home health aides coming into the house, typically around $62,000 a year. Assisted living facilities, $54,000 a year. Nursing homes, $108,000 a year. And those are just the averages before memory care. If you add memory care to any of those, you can think about adding $12,000 to $48,000 more on top of any of these prices. And what we hear a lot is, well, that's okay. We've got things like Medicare, Medicaid, and to a certain extent, it is true. I think they are very important options that we should all have access to. But we just want to give you a little insight on what you might expect in this case. So Medicare doesn't pay for long-term nursing home stays at all. Basically, what the language says in Medicare is that you get 100 days of skilled nursing per illness. So if Alzheimer's is that illness, it's 100 days covered by Medicare, and then after that, you're going to have to find other resources to continue being in the nursing home. And Medicaid, it may pay for it a little bit better at this point. But there's income and asset limits, according to Medicaid, which may be a hurdle in getting approval or getting that payment. It varies from state to state as well, complicating the matters further. So they're not the cure-all, let's put it that way, that people might consider them to be. So again, just kind of pointing out the importance of maybe socking away money through your retirement investing to take care of this possibility. So a quick quiz for the group and just shout out numbers. What do you think the lifetime cost of dementia care might be? Anybody want to take a guess? Anybody? No guesses. Wow, usually people start shouting them out. But the lifetime cost is $392,000. So, and that includes, again, medical expenses, caregiving, home modifications. How about the lost income? If again, you had more working years ahead of you, but now you can't work as long as you've got the lost income, legal fees that come together with putting against trusts, power of attorneys, and then hospices and end of life is all in this 392. So again, we just kind of like to take this look at the costs and make sure that you have awareness over those possibilities. But let's bring it back to really just the quality of life issue. So your brain health and your lifestyle. Why are you saving the money for retirement, right? So you could have a high quality of life in retirement. And that includes your traveling, your volunteering, continuing or taking up hobbies, working, socializing. All of those things are really fun. But then now imagine that you're doing it with some form or some progression of cognitive decline. They may not be as fun to do. They may not be as rewarding or maybe not even possible. So again, just the awareness of how much impact you have over it and how much control that you can make sure that while in retirement, you have access to all these things that a high quality life we think is very important. Then lastly, we'll wrap it up with the fun part is well, how do we do it, right? How do we age-proof our brains? There's basically 5 ways to do it, and we're going to go through each one right now. And I kind of previewed this, but the most important one is sleep. It's your greatest ally in the fight to retain your brain. Now, remember I mentioned the brain flush from before, taking out that brain trash. So obviously, if that's happening while we're sleeping, it stands to reason that sleep is probably the greatest and most important way to do it. We have 90-minute repeating cycles. You may be somewhat aware of these terms. There's light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep. They happen every 90 minutes. In fact, after 90 minutes, sometimes we wake up. We don't remember that we woke up, but we did. Sometimes you do. You know, that wake up in the middle of the night might have been one of those times, but you go right back to sleep. The recommendation is 7 to 9 hours per night to get as many of those cycles in as possible, and then by extension, as many of those flushes in. And then we already talked about those physical changes, which is the brain shrinking at night. Some tips on getting some great sleep. Sleep in true darkness as best you can. Meaning if you've got the shades down and all the lights off, make sure that the phones are away from you. I'll give you a quick version of this story by Pete Sampras, the championship tennis player. He used to travel before scientists had actually said, hey, this is actually true. He used to know, at least for himself, he would travel with duct tape. And if any light was coming in through the shades, he'd duct tape it. Any lights, ambient lights in the room, like the TV light, the little red one, or maybe above there's that red light on the smoke detector, he'd tape everything because he needed absolute darkness. And obviously it worked out well for him, right? So he was on to something. The other way to do it is get some natural light early, meaning we have this clock in our brains that starts to count down from the time we wake up and telling us it's time to go to sleep again. But if we don't get out and get fresh air and get natural light early, we kind of just putter around the house first. The countdown hasn't really started yet. So first thing when you get up, just whatever it is, take a short walk, take the dog out, sit on the patio and have your coffee, but get that light as early as you can. And then lastly, chill out for better sleep. The cooler it is, the better it is. I'm sure everyone's been tossing and turning in a warm night in a room somewhere, but it usually doesn't happen in a cold room, right? You just kind of put the blankets up and you go to sleep and you snuggle in under those blankets. So the colder it can be, the better. Next is your diet. All right, so there's a gut-brain connection. There's 500 million neurons in the gut, and they're just like the neurons in your brain. And they communicate constantly. So think about if you're eating something that is inflaming your gut. That communication, that inflammation in your gut can also go directly to your brain, inflaming the brain and lowering its capacity to work at its highest level. So think about what diet I might be thinking about, because we talked about those blue zones. And a couple of them were in Greece. One was in Greece. One was in Sardinia. Any idea out there what diet might be kind of the best diet for gut and thereby brain health? Correct. It's part of the diet. I was thinking of a bigger term. Yes, the Mediterranean diet. So here it is. So you've got fish up there. That's the top left. Cold water fish is what we're talking about. Salmon, walleye, trout. So try to add those to your diet. And I always stress this to folks. We're not trying to tell you to stop eating what you're eating right now and only do this. We're saying if you don't have enough of this in your diet, just make an effort to start getting more of it into your diet. If you're cooking with an oil, then use extra virgin olive oil. It's the best one. Fruits and vegetables, I think we all know that. We've known that since kids, get as much fruits and vegetables into our diet. Nuts are also okay, but we kind of have the nuts that we want you to use. Walnuts, pine nuts, pistachios, and almonds are okay for the diet. And then red kidney beans and pinto beans. Things to avoid: processed meats, sugars, carbohydrates, and obviously things with additives, things with preservatives. Not good for us. There's a funny story I have for you. In 2009 at the University of Technology and Science in Chicago, they opened up a Twinkie and they put it under a glass case, and it's still there and it looks perfect. You could eat it today. So that's 15 years later, this Twinkie, because of those preservatives, because of those additives, is still edible. So, I'm not telling you to stop eating Twinkies. I just think you should be aware that Twinkie exists. And it's kind of a scary story. How about stress? Stress, this is an interesting one that surprises most people, because we all think, oh, well, stress is bad. We've heard stress is bad forever, and to a certain extent that is true. Long-term stress is very bad. That repetitive worry, anxiety, that'll definitely have its negative effects. But short, some stress, short, intense, in the moment kind of stress, it's actually very good for us. And some examples of what I'm talking about would be, you just got a new job, that day of your first job, or the day you entered college, or your children's wedding. All of those situations come with their amounts of stress, but it's good. And in the end, you feel really good at the end of those things, albeit stressful, and they were short-lived. Skydiving. Has anyone here been skydiving, by the way? I always like to ask every group. I don't get a lot of them. No, I have not been either. But I think that would be a pretty intense way to have some good stress, right? It's about 1 minute and 30 seconds after you jump out of the plane to hit the ground. But I think most people who skydive feel pretty good about it afterwards. So think about adding those to your life, those moments. And I'm not telling you all to go skydiving necessarily, but those type of moments. And that's very good. The other side of that coin, unfortunately, is the long-term stress that we do want to reduce. And all we have here is just 3 exercises all around mindfulness. If you get kind of in that cycle of worry or anxiety, and it's something that's happening maybe over several days and you're just fixated on something, well, these are 3 ways to kind of break the cycle. Breathing exercises, breathe in through your nose, breathe out through your mouth. Kind of the way that I learned it was you breathe in calmness and you exhale the anxiety. And that's something that, again, the goal of any of these is to just get your mind, just get your mind out of where it is and center it and think of something that's, kind of not that thing that's worrying you and causing the anxiety. Change of perspective. This one I use a lot just because I've read that perspective, when it comes to anxiety, when it comes to excitement, they're just 2 different sides of the same coin. The body really doesn't know the difference. Things that are happening to the body when you get super excited or super anxious, from a physiological point of view, they're exactly the same. The only difference is how you're perceiving it. So instead of getting anxious and thinking about the negative things that are about to happen, try to look at the positive things in that same situation. And my example is always what I do now. I always used to get very anxious and jittery and upset before I stood up in front of a group of people because I was afraid of all the things that it might go wrong. But instead, now I just focus on all the good things that I get to come out here and meet good people and answer some questions and see new cities all the time. And I just keep that perspective. So now that jittery feeling I get is excitement. It's not anxiety. And then lastly, rose, thorn, bud. Basically, again, just the way to get out of your own head. If you're feeling like you have some stress, just think of the rose, which is the best thing that happened to you in the last 24 hours. And just sit with that and think about how good it felt. Then, unfortunately, you have to think about the rose. There's bad things that happen. What was the worst thing that happened to you in the last 24 hours? And kind of sit with that. But then always end it with the bud, which is the future rose. All right, now I've thought about the best and the worst. Now what's the best thing that I can look forward to in the next 24 hours? So any 3 of these exercises are a way to just manage that long-term bad stress. And then we have exercise. I mean, we've been talking about walking and balance this whole time, so I'm sure this is no surprise. Exercise is very important. It improves memory and lowers the risk of dementia. And a study out of the University of Cardiff found that if you just walk, and we're not even talking about the intense walking from before. This is just, just taking a walk for 30 minutes a day, you can reduce your risk of dementia by up to 65%. And it doesn't even have to be 30 minutes in a row. It could be 3 10-minute walks, whatever the case is. As long as you get those 30 minutes in a day, you're reducing your risk by 65%. And I think it's really important at this point to make the point that none of these things that we're suggesting are very difficult. They're all little quarter-turn changes that you can make in your life. And we want to stress that it's actually very easy to just start integrating some of these things into your life. Maybe not all at once, but one at a time, just start picking up little things that improve your chances on reducing the risk. In case you have trouble making exercise a habit, we just suggest the CARS method, C-A-R-S, like cues, set up visual reminders, like putting your shoes next to the front door when you come down the stairs. Oh, let me take my 10-minute walk in the morning. But here's a funny thing. So we just did this Tuesday. And one of the guys there, he came up to me. He's like, I really liked that idea about cars. But when you were talking about it, my wife elbowed me. She said, you're not leaving your shoes by the door. She's like, I took all these years to get you to move the shoes. Now he's telling you to leave them by the door. So, maybe don't do that exactly, but something, some visual cue. Then A, action, park farther away. So I'm the kind of person that always look for the closest spot at the store. But now, just because of this idea of I can intentionally get more steps in by parking further away from the front door. Simple but effective way to get those steps in. Reward, do something you enjoy. So if you want to get moving, if you want to have some exercise, pick something that you have a good time with. I hate running, so I would never pick running. But instead, I do tennis. Me and my wife and some friends, we play a little tennis. It's not serious tennis. We're just out there moving our bodies and having a good time. And that kind of ties into the support one, which is find a workout buddy. So I've got quite a few of them, and we all hold each other accountable. You haven't played tennis in a week. We better get out there. That sort of thing. So that's the CARS method. And then the last way is cross-training your brain. And what do we mean by that? So it's really about learning new skills or learning new information. So there's this myelination on the brain. It's this coating, and it's made up entirely of proteins, by the way. But the thicker that is, the faster information moves around in our brains. And that gets thicker because we learn new skills, we take in new information. And then also, as we're learning something new, like in the picture, maybe you've never tried to play guitar. We're not saying that you have to become an expert at guitar, but just the process of trying to learn it will release norepinephrine, which is another way that trash is flushed out of the brain. And basically what we're saying is, another way to put it, generally speaking, is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. We all have the tendency to kind of get into our ruts and do the things we know, which is natural. But if you challenge yourself to get out of those same pathways and do different things and learn different things, that is what we call cross-training your brain, and it's very helpful for making the brain healthy and young. So here's just some ideas on what you could do to cross-train your brain. Basically, I'd mentioned a new song or new instrument, but new languages actually are very helpful in that case. Read a book. If you're a book reader, that's good. But what they're saying is, if you love books about World War II, don't pick up another book about World War II. It's kind of the same information. Pick up a book about Renaissance painters and learn that. Something new information that you're not familiar with. And of course, keep socializing with friends, meeting new people. That also fits the bill. We added this slide recently. It wasn't always here, but folks like yourselves we talked to after, and they would ask about the latest thing that they had heard about either from a friend or they saw it on TV. And the way that we put it is that the marketing of supplements is way ahead of the science. We just don't have enough data yet to say there's this one supplement, it's absolutely what you need. What we say is if you're thinking about taking something like that, ask your doctor. They may have some information that says, studies that I've read say this might work, so go ahead, or it's useless. So definitely, if you're thinking about taking supplements for your memory, definitely consult with your doctor. So again, we talked about your age versus your brain's age. Your brain may not be the same age, but again, you have a lot of control in making sure it's younger than you. Then there's that importance, not only that quality of life issue, but the possibility of financial ramifications as a cognitive decline occurs or if it occurs. And then lastly, we talked about the 5 ways to age-proof that brain, which leads us to this kind of parting quote from Dr. Milstein, which is, a sharp mind in older age isn't just a bit of luck, it's within reach for most of us. So what we would ask you to do next is, I know that everyone's got a copy of these workbooks. Terry let me know that the folks on Zoom had those emailed. So for all of you, the challenge is number 2. Choose an area to start using some of these tips in over the next week. And again, like I said, it's a little change. It doesn't have to be too much, but pick one: sleep, diet, stress, exercise, learning, and just start making those little changes in your life. And then, of course, when it comes to the financial impact of brain health, talk to Gordon, talk to Andrew, talk to the rest of Cornerstone Financial, and find out how your financial issues are they aligned with what we talked about today. All right, I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much, everyone.